So as soon as I verify that YouTube is receiving it.
Hi, Carl.
Excellent. Hey, Carl, welcome aboard. All right, we are good to go on YouTube. Thank you. Wig, if you don't mind kicking us off officially as
Yeah,
the co
sure.
chair, we should probably do a round of introductions, but I'll let you lead while I watch the technical parts.
Yeah, so
I think
this is the
Kirsty.
main.
I'm sorry. I think Kirsty kind of needs to go around 5:40. I mean, so you can save the intros for later.
Oh, yeah, that's
I
fine.
think.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Wig Zamor. I'm co-chair of the committee, which means I don't have any talent. This is my one position. And this is our main monthly meeting of the Rider Oversight Committee. We also have operations and marketing and then capital and finance meetings, subcommittee meetings. And I guess we should ask if there's any public comments from the folks on here, either phone or on the computer.
Hi, I have a question, Barry Steinberg. Is there any confusion between Union Square, Somerville, and Union Square, Alston?
Probably, but we can take that up later on. After Kirsty's done. So that can take into consideration when we talk about the Green Line more later.
I would say one had a Green Line branch about 60 years ago, and one has had one for about 6 hours now.
But it's a good point. Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that under the discussion of the Green Line. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there are Union Squares in almost every city that fought for the North in the Civil War. So I think, should we just, Len has asked that we do introductions later and just go right into the main presentation. So should we just do that? And
We can, yeah.
who wants to introduce Kirsty?
Oh, well, so thank you, Kirsty, for joining us. I'm Kirsty is from Boston. I forget your transit planner from Boston Transportation Department. So we're very fortunate to have someone like Kirsty with us, and she's going to tell us about how the Route 28 free fare project went. So take it away, Kirsty. And sorry for getting a little started late. So when you need to go, you just tell us you need to go, and we'll be appreciative for any time you spend with us. Thanks.
No worries. Sounds good. So I'm actually going to give a little bit, the slides I have prepared are sort of looking at a review of Route 28 pilot and looking forward to the 2-year free fare program. And then I'm happy to also pull up the report and then talk through any parts of that you all would like to.
You should be able to share. Yep, looks good.
Excellent.
Perfect.
If I go into slideshow, are you still seeing my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Fantastic.
All good.
Okay, great. So free bus. We are really excited at the city to have been able to expand this program. It is no longer a pilot because it is beyond the 6-month FTA designation of a pilot period. So it is now officially the 2-year free bus program on these 3 routes. So I'm sure you all are familiar, but we like to give some context for anybody who might not know. These are the 3 routes that are free in their geography. So connecting a lot of our rapid transit stations and main bus connections with each other in areas of the city of Boston that are largely transit dependent. So in terms of schedule, as you all know, this 2-year program has been a long time coming. So in July of 2021, then Acting Mayor Janey announced the original Route 28 pilot. We worked very closely with colleagues at the MBTA to get out a pre-pilot survey before the pilot began, and then to have the survey, the during pilot rider survey. Using that data, we were able to get to the Route 28 evaluation report, which we'll talk about later. And then excitingly on March 1st, 2022 is when the expanded pilot launched. That'll run for 2 full years, and we are planning to continue with rider surveys, the first of which we're aiming to be in the spring of 2022, and we'll be surveying riders across all 3 routes. So what are our key goals? These have changed slightly from the ones that we had prior, which you'll see at the end of the presentation when I go over kind of what we see as the main takeaways from each of our goal categories. But looking forward, we have these 6 buckets. So riders, we were very excited by the ridership figures from the Route 28 pilot. We want to continue bringing people back to transit and making it easier to attract new riders. Travel time impacts. So we are really interested in continuing to look at how free bus, and especially the all-door boarding portion of free bus, can help positively impact travel times and reliability on these really key bus routes. Rider equity, we know based on our demographic data and based on the most recent MBTA system-wide passenger survey, that these routes have a high portion of transit critical riders as defined by MBTA transit critical. We want to provide a direct benefit to those folks who need transit the most. In terms of the rider experience, we're really interested in looking at how free bus may impact people's perception of and satisfaction with bus service. So are they more satisfied overall? Are there any factors that are causing them to be less satisfied? That's something we want to monitor. And then finally, thinking a bit outside of just the rider focused perspective, is there a broader economic impact of free bus, especially along these corridors and in a lot of the main street districts that these routes overlap with? So that's something we're going to try to look into further with this next pilot program. Sales tax data is hard to come by in the state of Massachusetts, unfortunately. So we're going to have to see how this goes, but we have some thoughts, we have some ideas. We're excited to dive into what data we can get our hands on. And then finally, environmental impact. As we all know, getting people on the buses is fantastic for the environment, considering transportation makes up such a large share of the state of Massachusetts greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. So we'd like to try to look at some ways to model, quantify that a bit more and figure out what sort of environmental benefits free bus program is possibly having on our city. Of course, all of this cannot be done without our partnership with MBTA. Lindsay and Stephen have become close colleagues as we meet every Friday to talk about all things free bus. So we've had weekly coordination meetings since the summer of 2021. They've been really helpful sending over bi-weekly ridership updates from Route 28 pilot. We're still working together to figure out what pace of ridership updates is appropriate for this longer term pilot. They've been instrumental, Monisha and Anna Gartzman also in helping create the surveys. And then we worked together to make sure that we had a signed memorandum of understanding detailing the cost structure and responsibilities of each of our organizations and scheduling the launch of everything. So ride routes 23, 28, and 29. We get asked this question all the time. So I won't go too much into this because I want to save time for the report, and I'm going to let you all sort of dictate what we talk more about, so we can come back to it if you want. But basically, these 3 routes, they're really essential travel connections. So they connect people into the rapid transit network to get them farther across the city and the region. These cross a lot of our really high ridership bus corridors, so Blue Hill Avenue. More than 50% of people on Blue Hill during peak periods are in a bus. It just goes to show how heavily trafficked it is by our bus riders. And also, excitingly, the Route 29 bus uses our new center running app bus lane on Columbus Avenue. So we're excited to see what interplay we find between having both free bus with all-door boarding and center running bus. And then also all of this comes from Mayor Wu's perspective that public transit is a public good. It should be funded as such. So the program costs, happy to get into this if you all want. Basically, we're paying for both, primarily the fares. So what are we losing in terms of fares? And that takes into account things like how did people already pay? If you're buying a weekly pass, how much is your per boarding tap? How much should the city be reimbursing MBTA? So it's not quite the full $1.70 to ride the bus. Instead, it takes into account things like that, or if people transfer and MBTA is recouping those fare costs elsewhere. And then on the ride, we are paying the full fare because it's just easy per trip. Everybody pays $3.35. When the free bus program causes the MBTA to run more service than it would otherwise, whether on the fixed route buses or on paratransit. The city is also helping MBTA pay for some of those operations costs. So those are sort of the secondary cost levels you see on this slide. And those are only implemented as needed. So for the Route 28 evaluation, we used in-person and online rider surveys of both Route 28 riders and then a set of comparable route riders. Those comparable routes were selected based on rider demographics, land use patterns, and geography. We also looked at a lot of MBTA operational data. Philip Groth is an amazing human who creates beautiful spreadsheets of MBTA operational data. It's a great person to work with. And then also one-on-one interviews. So we did phone interviews with a number of different riders to ask more about some of the contradictory things we learned through the survey effort. That was great. We're really happy with the results, but looking forward, we're kind of moving with a new approach for the 2-year program. So we're going to keep those in-person and online rider surveys, and we're going to keep the MBTA operational data, but instead of doing interviews, we're actually going to move towards focus groups. It's a more efficient use of time, and we're interested in not just asking people questions, but generating some more conversation and discussion about people's travel patterns, behaviors, and perceptions of free bus. We're also looking to hopefully do some business surveys, focus groups with business and community leaders to understand how they view the impact of the free bus program, and then that economic and environmental modeling to get at those goals of economic impact and environmental impact that we talked about earlier. So the exciting part, pilot results from the Route 28 free fare pilot. So you can see that these goals are a little bit different. Encourage ridership, improve service, improve or maintain travel times, improve rider experience, deliver economic impact for riders, and prioritize rider equity. We've shifted these around, kind of combined some of them, but these are our top line headline takeaways from the city's perspective from the Route 28 free fare pilot. So free fares substantially increased ridership. Dwell times per passenger decreased by about 20%. Route 28 absorbed a significant increase with minimal negative impact on travel times, and we can dive into those specific numbers if y'all would like to more. Route 28ers really liked the easier boarding process, and overall satisfaction with the route improved. About 20% of riders saved more than $20 a month on transit fares, and the majority of Route 28 pilot riders were in fact transit critical and receiving these benefits. So those are the headlines, so to speak. In terms of lessons learned, I find this slide kind of interesting. We really were only able to look at 3 months of the pilot for the evaluation period because of the delays in getting operational data. And that's a pretty limited time frame to see changes in travel patterns and behavior. So we're excited to have the opportunity to look at 2 years of behavior change and more certainty in the length of the pilot. The Route 28 pilot was originally only supposed to be 3 months and then kept getting extended as the city had enough money to cover fares. So we're eager to see whether or not people change commutes or switch bus routes or what other rider-centered behavior changes we might see with a longer program. The other finding is many riders do take more than one bus. So we are hoping and expecting that the economic benefits associated with the program will increase as the number of routes increases. People can get more places with entirely free travel. The interviews really helped get at more complex questions and intangible benefits. So for example, while about 2/3 of people based on their travel behavior and whether or not they bought a pass did not save money as a result of the pilot, 75% of respondents said the pilot was saving them money. So a little bit of contradictory information there. Interviews kind of helped us get at that question a bit more. As I mentioned, we added a goal of environmental impact of the new program. And then finally, good news travels fast. So we were really worried about marketing this program and making sure everybody knew and people weren't buying monthly passes if they didn't need to ahead of time. And it worked. We got the word out, but that's in large part because people were really excited to share this news. We did extensive flyering along the corridors, got car cards onto the buses so people could see them, but but really that word of mouth is really important for the success of the program. So that's the conclusion of my formal presentation. I'm going to minimize this and just pull up the final report on this pilot results slide. And I'm happy to go through this and answer any questions. And I can be here for another 20 minutes. 5:40 is not a strict have to go time. So.
Well, if that's the case, Kirsty, thank you very much. Then we can, quickly do a round of intros. So you know who you're talking to.
Should we keep
I guess.
Should we keep your slide deck shared, Kirsty, or do we go back to the previous view in case anybody wants to refer to the slides? It's up to you.
It's kind of up to you all. If you want to see graphs and data, I'll keep it up. But if you'd like to just have a conversation, I'm happy to pull it down.
I'll let the committee members decide.
Sure. I would say pull it down, and then if someone wants to refer to this or something else in the deck, they can ask for it. And so we'll just go around and do intros, and as we go around, if you have a question, then right after you introduce yourself, you can ask your question. So why don't we start with a fellow, well, I don't know if he's a colleague of sort, but he's certainly a professional like you, Bradley Putnam from CTPS.
Hi, Bradley Putnam. I work in the Transit Analysis and Planning Group at the Central Transportation Planning staff.
Guess Bradley has no question.
I defer to all of you and your great wisdom with your questions.
Okay. And then next Wig, and then Wig will take over.
Hi, I'm Wig Zamore from Somerville, and I'm wondering, you may have said this and I may have missed it, but I'm wondering if people tapped in even though there was no charge so that you could track linked trips and things like that.
So no, we did not have people tap in. The fare boxes were entirely turned off, and we actually even procured covers to go on the fare box that said that their trip was free so that people wouldn't accidentally tap and get charged. The way we did ridership counts was with automatic passenger counters. So unfortunately, we didn't get that trip linkage data. The way we got at transfer behavior was through the rider survey.
Great, thanks. I've got another question, but I'll wait till everybody else has gone too.
So you want to take over, Wig?
Yeah, sure. Jacob, do you want to go next?
I've got some comments to save to the, not really. I mean, it seems like a good program, and it seems like, yeah, no real comments there.
Okay, and a brief introduction?
Oh, hi, yes, my name is Jacob Deck. I am a member of the Rider Oversight Committee, along with all these people, and I'm currently in school.
And we're hoping for you to hop out soon.
One more term.
Carl has said he's got a little bit of a problem with a connection, so he's not going to introduce himself. Stefan, what about you?
Hi, I'm a resident of Lynn, where we've got some new exciting bus lanes going in. I don't know if our underserved community in Lynn will ever have a chance to participate in a free fare bus pilot, but certainly our community could use it. I'll just ask one quick thing. You mentioned the survey to get some of the details about linked trips. What was what was your guess on the percentage of responses? And if you already said that, I'm sorry that I missed it.
Yeah. So what do you mean percentage of responses? Percentage?
Oh, like out of the total ridership that participated in the three routes for no fares, what percentage of those rides do you think would you say participated in that survey to get the linkage information?
Yes. So we didn't have a huge number of people who took the survey, but we did hit the goals that MBTA established in order to feel comfortable reporting as a representative sample. So specifically, I'm looking at the presentation right now for the questions about whether or not people had a pass or whether or not they transferred. We had 102 responses on the Route 28 specifically. We are looking through the 2-year program to hopefully increase the number of responses that we're getting. And as a trade-off, shorten the survey a little bit so that we can feel more comfortable saying that the sample is representative.
Well, just a quick follow-up.
Kirsty,
Go ahead.
Kirsty, I think you may have mentioned that some of the data comes from the MBTA's most recent system-wide passenger survey. And was that one of your data sources?
So no, that wasn't one of our data sources used in the evaluation report. It was used in the selection of the routes.
Oh,
for the
okay,
program. Yeah, great question.
I'm guessing that the fare transformation, once all the new hardware on board and tap on, tap off is implemented, that would go a long way towards giving you the kind of linkage information, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's the way I understand it.
Yes, I actually used to work in fare collection systems, so pretty familiar with the back end of the proposed system. Yes, that would give a lot more data. I still don't know if the MBTA, I think AFC 2.0 is much more nimble, but it was not going to be possible for us to ask people to tap and not charge them under the current system. I don't think they had that capability on the current fare boxes. One other note is I don't know if MBTA has formally said yet whether or not they're intending to have everybody tap on and off, with the exception of commuter rail. So
good point. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's still up in the air. Yeah. Thank you. I'll call on Jacob next. No, Jacob already went. Craig.
Here I am. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. A couple questions. Craig Oskowski, public member. I live in Milton, so I am very familiar with Dorchester and Mattapan, and although I don't ride the routes frequently, I know exactly where they are, and I know the landscape around here. So in the pilot program for the 28, you said ridership went up 20%. How much of that is due to just were you able to discern how much of that was based on the program versus how much was just general uptick post-COVID, with waves of COVID? Was it just dumb luck that it was 20? Like, hey, it was because of the free buses, and it's actually no, it's because people get vaccinated, more people were riding buses. Like, were you able to control for COVID at all in your numbers?
So it's an excellent question, Craig, and it's funny you asked because we actually just got this question from Commonwealth Magazine because we are reporting, in our headline figures, we reported the 38% increase in ridership, which is true. So that is the increase. If you actually scroll down a little bit more, whoever has the report up, keep going. You'll eventually, here we go. So the red bar graph, you can see that there was a 38% increase from the pre-pilot average to the during pilot average. The system-wide bus experienced an increase of 16%.
Got it.
So
you just netted out the system average to get to the
22% figure that MBTA has been reporting. Yes, so 22% because of free fares is our guess, based on the data available. You can also see here too on this next slide, another aspect of ridership that I found particularly interesting is that the Route 28 is by far surpassed all other routes in terms of returning to pre-pandemic levels of ridership.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially compared to, this is the list of comparable routes that we looked at right here in our analysis of the 28.
Great. And the other area I wanted to poke out a little bit, and I think my colleagues are already going down this road. So you said 2/3, your guess is 2/3 of folks are transferring after they get off the 28?
So not necessarily transferring. Actually, if you'll go to slide 29 of the report, I have more fun graphs for you all that I think will help illustrate what we looked at.
I'm a visual person, so this is great.
Tell me where to stop.
Yeah, so keep going. You're going to go down to quite a ways. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Wow, that's a lot of detail.
It is.
That's phenomenal.
It's a lot to write.
Wow.
Here. So what does it mean to save money? So to get at this question of whether or not people save money, as you all know, we had to look at both transfer behavior and whether or not people were purchasing any sort of pass. And so these two slides show kind of what our analysis, first, the process for people who might not have thought about it deeply. What does it mean to save money? Who's not saving money? Who is? So we looked at a combination of how often people ride and what fare they typically pay based on how often they said they were transferring in order to estimate how much money they were saving. And so in this next slide where it says 34% of riders are saving money from the pilot, you can see that the two groups of people who don't ever save money are those who have a pass or those who always transfer. So this doesn't explicitly state the transfer rate, but we do have that data, and it went into us figuring out who was benefiting from the pilot.
Those numbers don't play into how the city reimburses the T on this. I'm trying to think of an example here. Is the T actually making money off this because they're getting paid twice? They're getting paid once for the free trip on the 28. They're getting paid from the city, and then that person transfers to another mode and they pay their full fare there. And so is the T actually making out like a bandit there?
So I don't answer that question, but I don't think so. So the way that we
if not a bandit, is the T are they benefiting at all more than you would think, actually, in a way?
So the way we set up the memorandum of understanding with the T was before the pilot even started, we needed clarity on a price per boarding, just because of the way that procurement reimbursement work on the city side and how the MBTA needed to get paid and know they would be made whole for these free boardings. So what we did at the start of the Route 28 pilot was we worked with Lindsay Heffernan and her team to get at an estimate of what is actually the average fare that a Route 28 rider pays when they board. And that does take into account the estimated transfer rate. So they did reduce that per boarding price based on an estimate of how many people were transferring, either to bus or subway, and whether or not they recoup that cost anyways when people did tap onto the orange line or onto the silver line or onto another bus. We did not go back and revisit that transfer assumption or that per boarding cost based like mid-pilot based on the data. So theoretically, if we underestimated the number of transfers people were making or the number of people who transferred, the T could be making a slight profit on this. But
I buy what you're selling. You did your best estimate ahead of time, and maybe you could be a little off in either direction, right? It could be more people or less, but you're not significantly far off, and it wasn't counted for in the model.
Precisely. And we also accounted for transfer behavior in establishing the per boarding costs for the broader 2-year program. And all of that information is detailed in the memorandum of understanding, which can be requested by the public.
So that takes care, and if my other members will indulge me on one last question here, that takes care of the T side. So let's call the T a wash. The T's getting give or take enough to cover the fares that they would have gotten otherwise. Maybe some days more, some days less. From a rider perspective, if only 34% are purely, just taking that service, and the other 66% are not. It's interesting how when you think about how you frame. I'm sure if you simplify this in the media or how it's presented out there, it's like, oh, this is a free program for riders. It isn't. It is, but it's not as. The T is an interconnected system, and there are limits to as much as you want to benefit people. If you only eliminate fares on a portion of an interconnected system, the benefit has a natural cap at some point. So I think, I'm not sure what that says. I think people are probably overstating the benefit to people, and they're not getting into the nuance that you provided in your slides regarding it's about faster boarding, it's about better service, and some of those things. I'm sure some of those are lost in the kind of stripped down narrative of free buses.
Right.
And I think it's also interesting around, as we think about moving this forward, what's the right model to move it forward? If it goes from 3 to, how do we expand that to the way where people really are getting a benefit and they're not having to pay just at the next, they're not paying at Mattapan, they're paying at the connection point, but they're still paying. It's not true. Like, how do we get to that next step in the process?
Right. So a couple points on that. Absolutely. Under Route 28 specifically, 34% of riders are saving money. Now that we have 3 interconnected routes, we're excited to see how that figure might change in terms of the number of people saving absolute money. But to your point, everybody got the operational benefits. And when you're talking about a means tested fare program, you're not necessarily going to see those same operational benefits theoretically in the future under AFC 2.0, but in the current state, you don't get all door boarding. A couple of other things we've been thinking about at the city as part of this program. First, we heard from people in interviews that they enjoyed riding the bus a lot more, in part because there was a reduction in conflicts between operators and passengers, because nobody's being asked whether to produce a fare or that kind of thing. So people noted multiple times that improved their experience of riding the bus. We also, as a city, have a goal of mode shift, of increasing the number of trips taken on transit, and removing fare removes a really important barrier for new riders or people who are unsure of how to use the system. It can be really intimidating to get on a bus, even if you use the subway, because there's this fear of holding everybody up, not knowing how to pay, not necessarily knowing how to use the fare box. It's so much different than fare gates on the subway system. So we see that as another important aspect of this program. And then finally, too, well, in terms of absolute dollars, everybody's experience is different based on their transfer behavior and based on whether or not they have a pass. Something that really came across in my conversations with folks has been the mental health benefit of just knowing I can get on this bus if I need to get somewhere, not having to scrounge around for change, not having to find your Charlie card, knowing you can bring all your kids with you on the bus. There is a bit of relief tied to having transit access that is free. And of course, Route 28, it only serves a certain portion of Boston. It only gets you to a certain number of places. But that is another aspect that we're looking to talk about a bit more in focus groups. And actually, you all might be interested. I've only watched part of it myself so far, but Mayor Rue, Representative Presley, and former acting Mayor Kim Janey held a press conference today at the Roxbury Community College about the free bus program, and some community college students and families spoke about how the free bus program impacted them. So you're totally right, Craig. This is not a clear, everybody who boarded the Route 28 bus saved money. That's not the story, but I think there are a lot of other benefits that everyone who's getting part of this getting.
There definitely are. I think it's just more of in a world where there's, it's trying to figure out if this is the right way to spend the money and get benefits, right? Is it better to make three bus routes free, or to reduce, or take that money and reduce all bus fares by 25 cents? Or, I'd love to make them all free. I'd like to make the whole system free. That would be great. It's just trying to figure out how do we compare this option versus, I guess is where I'm going. But Jacob, you have a question there. I used my time here.
One of the significant concerns at the start of the pilot was what effect free paratransit fares would have on demand and such along the corridor. Do we have any answers to those questions?
Yes, we do. So if you can go back to, actually, I'll have you scroll down 2 slides so we can talk about costs for paratransit riders and cost savings, and then we can go back up to ridership figures. So we were able to look at the data and discover that the ride customers who took advantage of the free fare pilot, so they had trips that started and ended within 3/4 of a mile of the Route 28, saved on average $13 per month. So that's pretty significant savings. And we also saw that in total, especially since this is a much more clear-cut case as opposed to Route 28, they were just paying for boarding. In total, paratransit riders saved almost $23,000 because of this pilot.
Did demand for paratransit service go up?
It did, but not as much as we thought it might. So if I could ask whoever is running the presentation to go back up to slide 13. Yeah. This one. So the ride average weekly ridership. So we did see a 29% increase in the ride ridership within the free fare pilot zone, where compared to only a 6% increase in trips system wide. So we're estimating about a 23% increase in demand for trips on the ride system as a result of the free fare pilot.
I'm going to pop in with a couple questions. I think we should finish going around. On slide 14, we have 5% switch me from vehicle, and I mean I'm not surprised that the number is fairly low because it seems like these routes are routes where people are transit dependent, so you would expect them to have the vehicles to use in the first place. Am I correct about that?
Yes, this is
Okay, great.
transit critical neighborhoods.
Okay, so was there any consideration about maybe doing a pilot at some point in a place where people do have vehicles, see if you really get most shift from fare elimination?
So we've really focused on leading with equity first in our selection of routes. And so we want to serve people who are reliant on the transit system.
Right.
So we have focused on transit critical areas.
Right.
But the other thing I'll note is that when I told my colleague, my former colleague at the city, Alal Mukhal, who did our transportation demand management point system for the city that was released and our parking maximums, and I told her we got a 5% car vehicle mode shift, she just about jumped for joy, because on a broader scale, though 5% is objectively a small number, if you scale that up and were to say like, okay, every if 5% of all trips were replaced with bus instead of cars, that would do a significant amount for congestion and traffic in the city. So it's a great question though, Lynn. I definitely, it's something for me to think about and look into. This is also another one of those questions we're really interested in looking at over 2 years to see if people's behavior shifts.
Right. You said the goal was to do shift to transit maybe by 50% or 30%?
I should know this off the top of my head.
I thought you said it earlier.
50%.
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
right. I mean, so I saw it interesting too that you had a little shift from walking and biking to the bus. I mean, which if people are walking and biking and they would prefer not to, I guess that's a good thing, but so I'm just trying to understand. Boston's goal is to do more shift from car though, to transit. So switching from walking and biking isn't necessarily the goal, but it all depends on the reason why, I suppose. So one other question, and that has to do with dwell time. So I noticed that the dwell times, even though they decreased significantly, and the most on the 28, they were still decreasing, over other routes, not nearly as much. Do you know why the dwell times were decreasing so much? On everything else? Okay, great, thanks.
Yes, so a couple of responses. First, on the walking and biking, just for your information, anecdotally from the interviews we did with folks, some people mentioned that they typically, if they're running late, they might walk to their job because they weren't convinced that the bus would arrive on time, but they perceived greater reliability of the bus and so then started taking the bus to work instead of walking because they felt more comfortable that they would get to work on time. Others also, you're walking, you see like, oh, Route 28 is coming, I could just hop on the bus.
Right.
And people will hop on instead. And then the third thing is that this was collected mid-October. It is starting to get a little chilly. So we're not sure how much weather played a role.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
But for dwell times, it's because it's a per passenger metric. So because ridership went up on almost all of these routes, dwell time per passenger, since that denominator got bigger, did go down in most cases, just not at the extent to which the Route 28 did. And none of those routes absorbed quite as large of an increase in ridership as the Route 28 did.
Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Cool.
So Karen or Barry, do you have any questions?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Can I just ask, I think we're close to the end for you. I don't want to overstay your time, but can you just briefly describe the environmental measurements?
Yeah, so we are working right now to figure out exactly how we can quantify environmental benefits. So there are programs that exist where you can sort of input passenger modes shift and get at basically per person carbon dioxide emissions. These are all models, so they're all going to be estimates. We're also exploring opportunities we might have to coordinate with our environment department to do actual point sensing along the corridor. The environment department recently deployed some air quality sensors along, I'm forgetting which street, but it's in, I think it's in the Mattapan or Dorchester neighborhoods. So we're exploring that as a possibility as well to get at some actual data instead of just modeled data.
And have you talked with CTPS and, about the regional model and whether that's granular enough?
So we have not. And Bradley, I'd love to have that conversation if that's something you can help with.
I am not in the modeling group. My knowledge is quite limited. I believe the CTPS travel demand model is for demand for transit, for transportation usage. I don't know if it has any environmental data on it.
Yeah, it does.
yeah.
It connects with NOx, and the traffic analysis zones historically are about 1/3 of the size of a census tract. So it's pretty granular. And especially if you use NOx as opposed to NO2, you'll get a pretty good local readout because the NOx, the NO is hyper local. The NO2 is a little bit more regional. But if you use the hybrid, which is NOx, that's or carbon monoxide, they're both pretty good. And that's really, if you can get the right person in the model group, it's a push of a button to do that.
Thank you, Wick. I will definitely take that information back to my colleagues. We'll be in touch.
Kirsty, let's talk more later.
Yeah, sounds great.
So I think you probably need to go now. Is that right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, well, I think we want to thank you and also Len for arranging this and really appreciate your coming today.
Josh Whalen, he was the one that connected us.
Oh,
So
great.
he gets big credit for this.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Would it be possible before you leave for me to ask you one more very quick question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned a lot the city is coordinating with T to make this kind of project happen.
Yes.
And you're doing other project coordination projects. Like, what are there any institutional barriers that prevent you from this, like, smoothly doing your job? Like, do you have to go to a meeting, which is only once a month? Do you have to email one guy who checks his email once a week? Are there barriers that make that difficult that you can talk with us about?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest barrier that we've encountered is just that MBTA folks need some more, oh my gosh, they need more Monishas. So Monisha Reginald is amazing. I'm sure you all know MBTA mascot are lucky to have her. And she was very generous with her time on this project, but I know that means that she wasn't able to spend as much time on other projects. And moving forward, we've been told that her workload's pretty constrained. So I think additional personnel actually on the T side would be very helpful with expertise in this kind of program evaluation, modeling, surveying. Other than that, T folks have been super communicative, really great to work with. The weekly coordination meetings have been essential. So it's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you so very much for joining us. This is phenomenal, and I think congratulations as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you all have follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm sure Leonard can pass along my contact information. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your meeting.
Thanks.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the great work.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah, I'll be happy to pass along her email address. You don't have to go through me. So I think I think it's K Hostetter at boston.gov. So
Want to go into the subcommittee reports with capital first?
sure,
We don't have to. I can go with marketing, communications, operations first. If
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go. I could go. Sorry, before I fall asleep. So let's see. Oh, I thought Well, I know that we covered a lot. How could I forget? Brian Langevin talked with us about his fair policy ideas. And so I'm pretty sure that I sent the invite to the CF meeting to everyone. And so in that is the either the doc or the PDF for this plan. So you can go and check it out. And so I pointed out to him that the T is doing some interesting things with fairs, meaning thinking ahead. One is for means testing, and another is for the utilization of new equipment. So he might want to incorporate that into his thinking about how the fair policy should change. We're not expecting anything to happen, but he is, I think, wanting to send it to the board of directors, and so there's a little bit of a conflict, though, and I think a little reason for us to pause, maybe moving forward as fast or as intensely as we might have beforehand is because of the free fair pilots. So we don't really want to step on that initiative or seem as if we are not supportive of it. And certainly some of the premises in Brian's, or one of the premises in Brian's proposal is that the free fares probably isn't feasible, or necessarily a good idea. And so I think he just needs to work through that. And so nothing is going to go to the board of directors or anywhere, with the name of the Rider Oversight Committee on it without it going through this committee first. But that's not to stop any of us as individuals from sending a letter to anyone saying, these are my thoughts about things. And so ultimately that may be Brian's route, in which case all of our interactions with him were just a way of him testing his argument, and making it stronger, I hope. So that's it. But certainly as a longtime member of the Oversight Committee, and one who is very bright and thoughtful, I certainly want to support him in that. And I'm learning a lot. And if you haven't read it, I think you'll just be impressed with the detail and the breadth of it, and the amount of thought that clearly went into it. And after that, it was a short meeting, so we went through some of the decks, and the one that we focused on the most was I think it was the second quarter operating budget, and monies are coming in, faster than projected, and it seems like a lot of it is due to more riders, and so there were 3 scenarios that the T gamed out at the beginning, as they were doing the budget for fiscal year 22. And one was that the pandemic would just kind of suppress demand for usage of public transportation, meaning that the lingering effects of it would be so deleterious on the economy, meaning that there just wouldn't be much demand for transit, because people just weren't working because jobs weren't coming back or whatever. The second is that there would be kind of change in behavior patterns. So the economy would start coming back, but people it'd be more hybrid, and just a different world essentially than what we had before the pandemic. And the third was that we would be coming back more towards what we had pre-pandemic, but it wouldn't be quite there yet. And so what it seems like is happening is that the fare recovery and the amount of people using the system is matching that middle scenario. So I think that has some implications. I mean, if people just change their behavior patterns, even if the economy comes back to what it was pre-pandemic, and at least in terms of the net numbers, maybe the gross numbers, the behavior change will be different, and we may just be having to plan for a different kind of well, I'm trying not to be circular, or redundant, or tautological. It'll just be a different. I can't help it. A different environment, and I think that will require, its own kind of budgeting and planning. So that was it. As I mentioned, the T is continuing to look into means testing, and so it's not clear to me what's going to happen, but they are seriously looking into it, and I'm kind of impressed at this point the amount of continuity between the FMCB and the board of directors. So it seems like they're picking up a lot of things that the FMCB were doing and moving ahead. The decks are available, and so they are seemingly as transparent as before. So I'm happy about that. So I think I'll stop. Any questions, let me know.
Yeah, Len, one quick thing.
Yeah.
I checked my email, so unless I went into my junk box for some stupid reason, I don't think I got that. If it was an email where you shared Brian Kane's draft policy,
It would
I
have
was
been
going to
Brian.
put it into the Zoom chat here and in the YouTube video. If you haven't,
It's
if you have it
Brian
handy
Lan-
by the end of the meeting, I will share it. But we can distribute it later if it's
it's
not
Brian Lan-
convenient right
It
now.
was Brian Langevin, so
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Brian Kane of the advisory
Well,
board.
I didn't say advisory board. I know I didn't say advisory board. I may have misspoken and said Kane, but I definitely did not say advisory board. So
Gotcha. Okay,
no
different
problem.
Brian. That explains
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, he's our Brian.
Our
Not
Brian.
that
Yep.
not that Brian Kane isn't our Brian. Also, but Brian Langevin is more our Brian. So
Yep.
So it
Well,
seems
for
like
what,
I
for,
said it
for
on
what
March
it's worth,
11th.
because I went looking for Brian Kane, I just got to show that he did put this article out in Commonwealth Magazine just last month. So this is only about 5 weeks old. I'll just drop the link in Zoom and on YouTube, and we can read it later. But it's just it's an opinion piece from our friend Brian of the advisory board.
Yeah. So I sent it on the 11th, March 11th. It's the CIF agenda for March 11th.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
I will pull up our other subcommittee notes right now, and I'll do what I usually do and just put them on the screen a little larger for everybody. Since it's on the screen, I'll just summarize quickly. Rock policy and process. Talk about the process of the trackless trolleys going away. The post trackless trolleys services along Concord and Huron. What the operations might be like at the North Cambridge Car House post electrification. Of course, we had to talk about the PCC rebuild because otherwise we would disappoint Craig. But the good news there, which is it's worth calling out, and I hadn't heard that until our subcommittee meeting. The first one is in testing after the rebuild. Yay! We also talked about the Central Ave intersection and how it's like right out of the 1920s with no stop signs and no gates and no lights, and yikes. Hopefully we don't lose any more PCCs to collisions at Central Ave. Gas prices. that was my summary. If anyone disagrees with how I phrased that, let me know. I believe that captured the sentiment of the folks at the meeting. And I've got a to-do to follow up with some of the what are the goals of emergency drills, and Wig made, I took that specifically as a good point from you. When it comes to an emergency drill, preventing loss of life is always number one. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, and Josh pointed out, I didn't know that. I have to admit, I did not know that emergency drills are federally mandated. It makes complete sense that they would be. I didn't know that. I thought it might have been like on a agency by agency basis. We spent a lot of time talking about what would be involved with a Green Line extension, Union Square to Porter. Sounds like, sadly, it may never happen in our lifetime, but stranger things have happened.
Can I just add one thing
Please,
there?
please do.
And I've mentioned this online to one or two of you, I think. The first thing is nobody's asking for that extension right now. I think the issue is just the power company wants to rebuild a substation from scratch right in the way, and they've got plenty of land that doesn't require them to do that. And they erroneously reported that their ideas wouldn't block it, and they certainly would. So the elected officials in Somerville are on top of that. I think MEPA is on top of it as well, because they had to do a MEPA filing. The second thing, and forgive me if everybody's heard this from me, but I think just a couple people have. The corridor from Union to Porter used to be 4 tracks wide, and the buildings are still built 4 tracks wide. Two of those tracks were sidings for industry. And to my surprise, but it makes sense, the freight rail separations years ago, these were probably built 100 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. The freight rail separations a long time ago are not as great as the light rail separations today. So that can cause an issue. But I also started to look into, and this is the final and perhaps most important point, I started to look into single track two-way transit, which is used an awful lot for short runs. And often if they have a desire, they'll either put in an intermediate station with passing tracks just in that section, or they'll put in just passing tracks so that there's just a little loop on either side, and they can pass each other as needed. So in a way, that seems like it might be more realistic to try to create a single track to Porter long-term, and maybe have an intermediate station or a passing opportunity halfway, which doesn't seem to actually require time penalties. That was all a surprise to me. I'm just not as familiar with how many varieties of light rail transit there are in the world.
That is really good stuff, Wig. We can talk more about that at the next subcommittee meeting. I bet Jonathan Belcher will have some insight about single track majority operations.
It's true. It's only a few miles.
Exactly.
And as I said initially, the primary benefit, I think, is East Cambridge neighborhood, which feels a little isolated by being squeezed between Kendall and North Points, really large scale development, which is also important for other reasons. And Porter effectively is the center of Cambridge, but it also gets you closer to Arlington. So I think it would be a really nice small multimodal center for a number of different reasons. It also would have red and green going to opposite sides of the downtown financial district. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that. Unless there's any more questions or comments on this subcommittee report, I will call that done. And then we're on to Actually, a little ahead of schedule. Shocking. Do we have any external meetings
Yes,
to go over?
actually, sort
Please.
of. Not sure if this is the time for this, but people have kept reaching out to us on Twitter with issues they're having with the MBTA ride service. I can read a DM we got, a direct message we got from someone. To whom it may concern, 3 times within the past month, the ride has left me completely stranded with no way to get to work. I asked to be dropped off at my place of work, which is less than a mile away, by 4:45 p.m. The ride either just didn't pick me up at all, or when I call, they say it won't be there till after 5 o'clock, which by that point it's too late, as I have scheduled appointments for my job. I am now losing income and clients because of the ride's failure to follow through. Just yesterday, I called twice asking where my ride was. The dispatcher said, "You were picked up at 4:37, and I clearly was not." Unacceptable. It is a completely unsafe and horrible service that the wrong people are being picked up. I've had to miss work 3 days within the past month due to the ride's failure to simply do their job. I no longer trust the ride whatsoever, and now my career is being affected. What is being done to change this? Prior to this, I had been taking the ride more often for the past 6 months and still only have 2 flex rides a month. Again, the ride is not trustworthy and needs a complete overhaul. The ride is currently bringing harm to the disability community. There is much work to do to better your service. So, pretty strong words there.
Well, let's see if we can let's take this to ops and then see if we can get someone from the ride to come and talk with us. And maybe not get them for April, but let's keep trying until we get them. I mean, Melissa DeLay, I mean, she probably isn't still in charge of it. I mean, but she could probably point us to the right person. I mean, so why don't I look into that? You know, and you're pretty good at staying on top of me, Jacob. I mean, so ping me and go.
I will.
Have you gotten in touch with anyone? And I'll get them to ops MCOP.
Mm-hmm. Also, the T has just announced a Blue Line tunnel diversion. They will be closing the Harbor Tunnel. I think for maybe a weekend, possibly a week. Hang on, let me check.
Sorry to keep yawning at you all. My mic on mute.
Hey, Jacob, on the ride, is there any discussion of Judge King's annual session?
Is that the that's the T's disability, the disability suit. No, she did not. The person who messaged us did not mention that. Is there any way I can redirect them toward that service?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can, if you email me offline, I can dig back through it. I have to say, the year I went to a few of those meetings, including one in Boston at the city council, but Judge King meeting, it was really pretty eye-opening to watch that process.
All right. So
they really take it. That meeting takes these issues really seriously.
I have updates about the Blue Line. It will close. The Harbor Tunnel will close for 13 straight days starting on April 2nd, like complete shutdown. And with the number of track feet they're saying to replace, that equates to 140 feet of track replaced per day. So that just about gets from one end of my house to the other end of my house. That's not a lot. And given it's pretty in kind with we had the T's chief engineer over here the other day talking about the Orange Line track replacements, and he said that he could not imagine how to replace the track faster, even though every single agency in the United States basically does it faster. Not to mention internationally, and the T has slowed down track replacement speed in the past couple decades, so I'm curious as to what's going on there.
Well, I know that in the Blue Line tunnel, there's also going to be a complete overhaul of the drainage. So it's not just track and ballast, track and ties and ballast. I believe I heard on the report earlier today that the pumps are going to be completely replaced, as well as the actual drainage that brings all of the water to the pumps. So it's I agree that 180 feet per day sounds pretty poor, but given that the drainage is one of the bigger issues, it's not just the track itself. I think let's just say I'd like to know more myself.
And I don't have any basis for saying whether 180 or 140 feet a day is slow or not. I mean, what basis does anyone have here for saying that that's whatever rate? I mean, what basis does anyone here have for saying whether that's fast or slow? Because I just don't know. I mean, so I'm not. I'm just. I mean, is it comparison to other systems?
Japan
Or-
Central managed to replace basically an entire downtown commuter rail line's tracks in one day.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, what kind of resources they put into it?
Yeah, a lot. But the thing is that
Well,
that's the question then is, are you putting enough resources into this project? Like the Blue Line is the subway line that has the highest post-pandemic ridership of all the subway lines. Like people on that line depend on that for service, and it goes onto the harbor, which is you can't walk under Boston Harbor.
well, Eric, sorry, Jacob. I mean, I would hope that Eric's visit with us, was convincing that we have competent people in charge who are doing the best they can.
Frankly, I think it was exactly the opposite.
Wow. Why?
Because
Let me-
one of the questions that I love asking people is, how can you do your job better? Like, do you need more? Like, how? Like that's why I always ask people. One piece of concrete, one piece of institutional change, and like, would it help you to do your job better if you had magic unicorns that could replace a mile of track in an hour on your construction team? It's like, who cares about feasibility? Just give me pie in the sky stuff. And his answer to that question indicated to me a lack of imagination and a lack of curiosity as to how other cities do this job and how he could do his job faster and more efficiently and better. And
Okay.
like, even if it's, I could use $500,000 more and hire twice the numbers of workers and do the job 10 minutes faster. Like, if he could just, if he's done the math.
Okay,
and
I understand,
that,
Jacob.
I
I understand, Jacob.
So
I
let me-
understand, but that to me isn't my definition of incompetence. So if that's your definition of incompetence, have at it. But I don't agree with it. So as far as I'm concerned, he's still very competent. And so I trust.
Let me jump in here.
Can, you know. Good.
Let me jump in here and let's get off of evaluating individuals that we met with months ago, and let's talk about the Blue Line issue specifically. I think I agree with both of you, so I'm gonna take the middle ground here and be the diplomat here. Len, I think you're correct in that we don't have the right level of expertise within this group to say whether this is fast or slow. But I agree with Jacob that it is completely within our purview to see something like this essentially announced out of, very, very quickly. And, like, oh, by the way, a month from now, we're doing this massive 2-week shutdown. I think it's completely within our purview as part of rider oversight to ask questions like, is 2 weeks, is that a reasonable amount of time? If it isn't a reasonable amount of time, is shutting it for 2 weeks straight versus doing weekends or other alternative options, what's in the best interest of the riders? Is that, and I don't know, it could, 2 weeks to pull the Band-Aid off might be the right solution, or maybe doing it on weekends is the right solution. I think you're both right. I think we can't jump to the conclusion that this is a terrible idea, but it's completely within our purview to ask really to ask hard questions about it. Otherwise, we're just saying, hey, we trust them, they know what they're doing, and we can shut down the whole committee if we just say, hey, we met with that guy, he seems nice, let's not ask questions. So
Well,
it's somewhere in between the two.
I didn't say don't ask questions. I mean, and I think you're just really loading up. I mean, you're putting a lot of words in my mouth. I was questioning Jacob's assessment that this was not a good way of doing things. I didn't say don't ask questions. I just said
no, but then your argument was we met with a nice guy from engineering.
I said we met with a competent guy. I said we met with a competent guy.
Your first argument to Jacob was, Jacob, don't question this. We met with a nice guy from engineering, and I think it's perfectly within our purview. We should be asking tough questions, and maybe we can ask them in a slightly more diplomatic way. But I think it's important that we evaluate this from the perspective of the rider.
Well, I did say that I think we can have confidence that they have evaluated this and have a good rationale for doing it, and so if that is how you get to, I said don't ask questions, then fine, we can ask questions. What did they say? They've given us a month's notice.
So I guess my first question to this group is, because I struggled with that one a little bit myself. So I said it was a month's notice, and my first thought was, oh gosh, that seems really quick. And then my second thought, after I kind of paused on that one, was to say, well, what would it matter if I found out 3 months ahead of time? It's not like you're going to make plans to a month. You're going to forget if you found out 6 months ahead of time. Oh, by the way, we're shutting down the blue line in April. It's not like you're going to pre-plan your transportation needs 6 months ahead of time. So I think I'm okay with if the first question is, did they give us enough time notification? I think I'm okay with the month's head notice on it, but I'm curious what other folks think on this committee think.
I'm fine with the months.
Well, I'm sorry, Len.
No, I'm not fine. No. I was just answering his question.
I think things are apt to be a little chaotic with the federal funding that's kind of popping up. And that could be, part of the issue here, that people are seeing funds differentially and then making plans quickly. But I kind of like Craig's middle ground here too. I think both Len and Jacob have some good thoughts about this.
So, well, it is that monies are popping up that they have to spend. I don't know if this is that project. So that's why I didn't accrue that phenomenon to this. Because it may have been that they planned it for a while and they've determined that a month is enough time to give people notice. Because I remember them doing a survey asking people like, what is the amount of time that would be good for you in terms of making plans. So it may be that they took the results of that and decided that a month is the best, the amount of time that's going to get most people. You're going to have some people who are going to go, I need more time. Yeah, all right. If they give them more notice, perhaps if they can give them more notice, perhaps they will. I think we've seen. Go ahead.
I was going to actually, putting it beyond the notice period, I actually like the timing in terms of getting it done in April. Boston is a tourist city, and the Blue Line does service the airport. And so, if if you're thinking to get this done in April before the summer crowds come in, I think seems reasonable to me. I think it also, if we can squeeze this in before more ridership, obviously it would have been great to have done it in really low ridership during COVID, but the sooner we can get something in while ridership still remains low, the better as well.
Also,
when it comes to shutdown projects.
What about bus lanes? Like during the year-long shutdown of the Green Line between Leechmere and Science Park, they put bus lanes on that bridge, and there are why not? Could the T dedicate a lane in the harbor tunnels for buses for this time of service? These riders really depend on this, and they're going to be stuck in buses and traffic. And is it an institutional issue why they can't talk to MassDOT about this? Are they owned by the port? Are the tunnels owned by the Port Authority?
Well, I know
is
from
there
experience,
a reason they didn't suggest this?
I know from experience that during rush hour, the Sumner and Callahan tunnels are basically full. They're just packed. So a dedicated bus lane to take one out of only two in each direction, I don't think would fly. But I also have not heard what the routing is going to be because the
Yeah, can
Tobin
the
bus
buses go on
lane.
the Sumner or the Callahan?
Say it again.
Can the buses take the Sumner or the Callahan?
Yes. Yes.
They can. Okay.
Oh no, sorry.
You
The
said that awful
old-fashioned diesel
definitively.
ones can. That's a good point. With the extra height of the hybrids, I don't know. I would have to find out. I know that the hybrid diesel electrics have an additional height issue. I know that historically, yes, routes from Lynn would go through both Sumner and Callahan.
Okay.
That's a good question to find out. But again, like I was saying, the Tobin Route 1 north and south have been benefiting from the no, sorry, south. Route 1 south from Chelsea for Bradley, help me out. Is that 117 and variations?
The 111.
111, thank you. Yes, 111 and variations have been benefiting from the express lane on the Tobin. So if the Blue Line shuttles are going over the Tobin, at least into
They
Boston.
must be going through the tunnels, because to go over the Tobin and then snake their way through North Washington Street and past the North End to get all the way over to up the Greenway would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit from personal experience. I lived in East Boston from 2011 to 2013. And at that time, the new State Street station was still being built. And there were regular shutdowns of the tunnel on weekends to continue rebuilding State Street. And at the time, the buses did travel through the Sumner and Callahan, although Stefan, you're right, the bus equipment has changed since then. So I don't know if that's a factor. And in general, bus service and the shuttle buses are slower than the Blue Line just because they travel indirectly and travel with general traffic. Although I would point out that one benefit to shuttle buses is they are free. And so if a passenger ordinarily travels between downtown and Maverick, they get a free ride that they didn't get before.
I definitely echo the question of whether a month is enough. I mean, actually, it's less than a month because it's going to start on April 2nd, so that's 2 weeks basically. On the upside, though, I believe school vacation week for most schools in Massachusetts, or certainly in the Boston area, isn't that the second week of April, which coincides with the second week of the shutdown?
It starts on Patriots Day, which I think is April 18th or so this year.
Oh, rats.
Yeah, it's the third week.
No, then I'm wrong. Okay, so it's not coinciding with the vacation week.
It looks like this work is scheduled to finish before school vacation week, maybe.
Yeah, on the schedule update website, it says Saturday, April 2nd to Thursday, April 14.
Yeah, so if they stick to that schedule, it'll end 4 days before April vacation.
Yeah. Which might be the intent.
Oh, of course, because people on vacation are going to go to the airport.
Yeah.
Very good. Yep, good point. Well, it sounds like we've got some questions to ask about this. You saw on the screen that I'm sharing. I mean, there is a call out here about ducts and panels and waterproofing and concrete corroded elements, fire hose connection. I mean, there's a lot more than just track work being done.
One thing. I know that in the New York City subway system was planning to do a pretty long shutdown of the Canarsie Tunnel that carries one of their subway lines under the river. And I think they have the thing where they were doing similar work where they were replacing concrete cable banks alongside of the tunnel. And through basically instead of that work was scheduled to take a long time because they were jackhammering all of the cables out and relaying them. But it turns out that if you just hang new cables along the side of the tunnel, you can do the work in about 10 to 20% of the time. So someone pointed that out to the MTA, and they were able to do it in, I think, just a couple of weekends instead of weeks of shutdown. So if the T is planning to not use that technology, I wonder why. Like, they have a labor issue right now. Like, there are not enough people to do all the jobs they need. So anything that can save their workers' time, I'd love to see them using it.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I mean, so what is it that New York did that same time?
So basically, I don't know 100% of the technical details. So there's the cable. So in underwater tunnels, like the Harbor Tunnel and like the Canarsie Tunnel, which is what New York City subway system was repairing, there are cable banks alongside of the tunnel. And in the Canarsie Tunnel, they had to basically jackhammer. The plan was to jackhammer the old cable banks completely apart with jackhammers, and then relay the cables in the old tracks. But what they ended up doing, which saved them a significant amount of time, was relaying new cables in new tracks, just alongside of the tunnel walls.
So is that is that what the MBTA is doing?
I don't know but one of the things that the MBTA mentions on project features is removal of inactive cables, ducts, and panels to prevent further corrosion. And so maybe they have to dynamite it anyway, but it's just one example of a best practice that he could be exploring in this project.
But
Jacob, you have a question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I mean, first off, I mean, is the project that they're doing similar enough to New York's? I mean, to warrant comparison. I mean, and do you know that they haven't already explored it? I mean, yeah. I mean, these are questions. I mean, but we just don't know. I mean, at this point, so what I would say, Jacob, is if you want, send Eric an email. Maybe you'll get a response.
Sure.
Jacob, quick question. Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
There could be some other things that we just don't know about. There may have been an ability to use the bus shuttle system that was in place for the Green Line and extend that at an advantageous price. There may have been some significant findings of more deterioration than they expected.
Well, on the bus shuttle thing, I can tell you, I think I was reading some of the budget information that they regularly plan on doing, 2 to 3 shuttles. That is priced in. So they do contracts, with the private carriers on the assumption that they're going to be doing 2 or 3 shuttles every weekend. So it's not a matter of taking advantage of extending the contract. It's more that the contract's already in place.
Yeah, they've been doing a shuttle every, I don't know, 10 minutes during the Green Line project. So
I think the other factor we haven't talked about is strictly you're completely underwater here too. There's an access point on one end and the other end of the tunnel, and it's a pretty long stretch there. So it's there may be advantages to leaving the equipment down there and for all these things. Are we okay?
I'll just one last comment for me. I mean, I would expect that the order of operations is going to have to be get rid of all the old track, all the old ties, all the old ballast, rip everything out that's going to be replaced, and then this is speculation, educated speculation, but then at that point, once everything is gone, then probably they're going to mitigate leaks and plumbing and drainage, etc. And only after that's done, then go back in and lay all the track and circuits and cables and such. I mean, again, that's speculation, but I think that's probably it. I mean, you probably can't do it sectionally in an effective way.
Yeah, one last thing, as I'm sure Len and Jacob both know from the Red Line shutdowns, it takes a hell of a lot of buses to replace a subway.
Can I change topics to another new business?
Yes, please.
No, this is related to the Green Line extension. So obviously everybody's cheering that, excited about that. So not to be negative here. The only thing that struck me on that in reading that was the piece that the fare system is going to be slightly different for that station for the foreseeable future. And I don't think that, I'm sure that was presented to us at some point, and I just it didn't click to me until I saw that. And the interesting thing, I mean, we're a ways away for AFC AFC 2.0, right? I mean, we are years out from having that system fully replaced. So you're going to have a unique fare system at an individual station and potentially the rest of the Green Lake extension later this summer for the foreseeable future. So I don't know what the questions we should be asking about that, or but that seemed like we have a hard enough, folks have a hard enough time learning the existing system. I have a hard time and for these 3 systems, you use this weird paper ticket system, and it's only temporary, but not that temporary because you're gonna have to use it for a year. It's an interesting. I mean, it's out there on Boston.com.
It was a huge surprise to an awful lot of people who got on the train yesterday.
Yeah, I mean,
I was
I don't.
one of them. I was on the very first run. I
mean, you can make the legitimate argument that are we better off just having free entry at those sites until you get the new system up?
It's practically free entry right now because the tickets depend on people on the fair proof of payment systems like that.
Right.
You have a dude that wanders on the subway trains occasionally with a validator, and they check to see if you have your little chit. But the T hasn't budgeted for that, and there are going to be no people there. So basically, it's free entry anyway.
Assuming people don't pay.
I mean, isn't the other option to do what they're doing on the all other above Green Line stations? I guess that's what I'm surprised at. Is this is not, these are not the first above ground Green Line stations. Don't we have a model here of how things are supposed to go in Brookline?
Oh yeah, but the above ground stations on the B, C, and D are very much lower boardings per stop than what's anticipated to return to Leechmere. I mean, Leechmere is a big bus interconnect, and I don't think that paying at the front.
I'm trying to. I feel like I've gotten a validated ticket before over in Brookline Village.
Fenway had a validator for a while. I don't remember why it started and stopped, but yeah, there was a proof of payment.
Are those stopped now? Are those other locations? Were those temporary things? Because I remember one in Brookline Village.
Yes. They were temporary, and now those validators have been moved to the Fairmont line.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, Craig,
I guess oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right that at the moment there are 2 stations that operate in the way you're describing, both Union Square and the new Leechmere station. Have no fare gates. The reason why they work differently from the surface stops on the existing branches is because they're center platforms at Union Square and at Leechmere, and so the doors open on the inside of the trains. Whereas on the surface lines B, C, D, and E, the doors open on the outside of the train, and so the operators open all the doors to release the outgoing passengers, close the back doors, and then only the front doors open so passengers can tap the fare box when they board the train.
Got it.
Craig, you're entirely correct that this introduces an irregularity to the existing fare system. And my understanding is that that there are MBTA ambassadors, the folks who wear the red jackets, who are stationed at both stations, and they are assisting people with validating their fare media before boarding the train. And so whether we're paying per ride or they have a monthly pass, they can tap their card on the fare vending machine and get a proof of payment slip that they can then show to someone, I don't know who, at one of those 2 stations. But I believe that this will also be the system on the New Medford branch when it opens as well. So then it will go from 2 stations to what is that, a total of 7 stations where this will be the case. I do not know what the MBTA's longer term plan is for integrating this into the larger fare system.
It's also an awful lot slower.
Sorry, what's that? Which part is slower?
Well, you got to stand there and get the ticket.
Yeah, no, and which is fine if there's no train there, but if the train is there, I think it gives passengers less of an incentive to validate their fare.
Right. There's no, Stefan, there's no, if you see his train there, you can't run and tap and get on. You gotta,
No, but,
you gotta,
you can
you
still
gotta-
you can still board at the front door, or you can go up to the fare box on board. That's what I mean. The policy is not you have to tap and get proof of payment. It's the MBTA encourages people to tap and validate, but if you're running for it, no, you just go up to the front on the fare box.
Well, that's interesting. That confuses things further, right? So I understand. I think that's the right thing to do because that's just human nature, right? If I see a train there, I'm going to run and jump on it. But if you get stopped, how do you differentiate when two stops down the line, somebody says, "Hey, can I see your validated ticket?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I tapped at when I got on." Like you're gonna have two different kinds of. You're gonna have some people with paper proof and some people without paper proof, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, because the current Charlie card on a well, actually no, and that depends on whether the mobile validator is accessing the back end databases, because the Charlie card doesn't store transactions of last use. That's only in the back end IT systems, but you can pull up your last transactions even if you're a monthly pass holder at any subway station or any fare location that's wired up to the greater system. So I'm going to speculate that if inspectors or validators have online live validators, then the scenario that you just suggested wouldn't be a problem, because the validator would be able to phone home and say, "Oh yeah, this person did actually tap."
Yeah.
Or you're right.
If the
It is
validator
definitely
knows,
confusing.
if the validator can tell it's a monthly pass, then it doesn't matter whether they tapped in or not because they already paid for the monthly pass.
No, duh, of course, right? Because it's a monthly pass. I mean, even if you don't tap,
You've already
in
paid for all
theory,
your rides on the green line.
good point. Yeah, no one's going to get their hand slapped for having a monthly pass and
they
not
didn't
tapping. Well, okay, maybe it'll be a hand slap, but it's certainly not going to be a violation. If you have a
It's
monthly
not
pass,
fair
you don't tap.
evasion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Craig, I think the other thing I would say is that the system's already kind of leaky. There are people who make their way through fare gates without paying. There are people who make their way into buses without paying, and no one says that's a good thing. But I think that there's.
I'm less concerned about the leaks. I think I've been fairly consistent on this about not. My goal is to get people to use public transportation. The fare capture is part of that, but it's not. It's secondary to get people actually getting from point A to point B. I'm more concerned about just adding more confusion to an already confusing system. From a rider, the T should be concerned about lost revenue. That's the T's. But if I put my rider oversight hat on, from being a rider, I want a simple, intuitive experience. And to me, this is not a simple or intuitive experience, and therefore it is a bad thing for riders.
No, and everyone except for Jacob might remember when there was extra fare at Quincy Adams and Braintree, and when the fare structure on the D branch was totally different from everything else. And thankfully, those things have been regularized.
I heard legends of those.
Yep. There used to be an exit fare. You paid an extra token to get off at Quincy Adams or Braintree.
Yep. Yeah, Charlie on the MTA all over again. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say that I would not be surprised if part of the reason why Leechmere and Union Square and the other Medford branch stations are going to be real true proof of payment is partly to test the waters so that the T folks, for example, who were involved with the customer service agents training and the materials to, the in-station instructions, so they can actually have a trial run. I mean, it strikes me as being reasonable and appropriate to start off with true proof of payment at a few stations, in this case 2. And then, was it 4 more by the end of this calendar year? 5 more? 4 more. I would not be surprised if it's deliberate to do this initial slow rollout so that when the whole system goes to proof of payment, maybe, or just bus and Green Line. That we know what to expect from the
You're
customer.
being very your usual self, Stefan. You're being very glass half full. That this is you're viewing this as a positive thing. This is a pilot for the system of the future. Let's.
Yeah,
agree.
I admit
agree.
I'm erring on the side of saying that the people at the MBTA know what they're doing.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
admit I'm erring on that.
I would do a pilot like that. I mean, this would be a good opportunity for doing it. So yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah, Stefan, that's very generous of you to say that. My brief understanding of this is that both AFC2 and the Green Line Extension have been in planning for a long time, and Green Line Extension crossed the finish line first, with the thought being that
there's no grand plan here.
Could be. It could also be that somebody looked around and said, "Holy crap, we don't have enough fare gates to install at Leechmere or Union Square or whatever, so we can't do fare gates." Who knows?
Right, and so this is Plan B. I mean, this is definitely not. This was definitely not Plan A.
We can ask.
We should.
We can ask.
This is really good stuff.
And
I mean, this is making it more complicated instead of simpler. That's never a good thing for transit.
sometimes with transitions, though, you have that. Yeah. So.
I think if this was 3 months, we could all live with it. I think the problem is we're talking about 2 years.
Oh, wait. I guess
right? I mean, there isn't a timeline on 2.0, is there?
Well,
I think there is.
Yeah, I just don't know what it is.
I don't think I can pull it up fast enough, but yeah, that was just in front of the board with within this calendar year.
The new one's out. Yeah, I missed.
I might not be able to find it quick enough.
There are multiple components to AFC2, and I think different portions of it are planned to be implemented at different times. I think one of the largest elements, I think, is better integration between paying for commuter rail and paying for the other modes. And I think that's one of the farther off elements.
Oh, the irony of it all is that at this very moment, there is an ongoing public hearing since 6 p.m. on the fare media changes. It's literally going on right now as we speak. I went to the previous one, and I think I believe it's up previous. Well, I won't do it right now, but if I can find the link to the one that I attended last week, I recommend watching it because there were a lot of really good Q&A. And again, this is not about policy. This is about the media changes and going to contactless smart card, yada yada.
Right. So did they answer the question about whether it's okay to let someone use your T-Pass? Did you ask that?
And the answer is no, it is not okay. The expectation is that everyone who is old enough to not get a youth free what's the cutoff? Is it 8? How?
Whatever the age is, whatever. So
yeah, anyway, whatever the age is when you're no longer a kid and you can just follow your parent in. Everybody.
Children under age 11 are free.
Okay, 11. Okay, I thought it was younger than that, but yeah. So the expectation is that everybody, 11 and up, or over 11, will have their own thing. The thing can vary between a credit card that's tappable, or your smartphone with the Charlie Card app, or an actual Charlie Card, in a couple of twists on those. But yeah, the idea is that every person over 11 will have their own thing.
Right, because I know you can't allow someone, to use a discounted card, if they are expected to pay full fare. But I thought it was fine that if I have a pass, and I'm not using it on any given day, I can give it to someone else to use, on that day. And you're saying they said that's not allowed.
How about that? I just said it right. Riders 12 and over will have their own fare media to provide proof of payment. And part of what they're explaining right now is that the $3 fee, which is being investigated for how to do minority low income populations, that $3 fee is only partly because of the media itself, which costs I think $1.25 for a Charlie card. Like that's the cost for the physical card, but it also contributes to funding the one more trip protection, and that's a big part of it. Of a big part of why $3 to buy your Charlie card the first time.
But that's just not the same as saying that if I have a card, I can't let, I as an adult have a card, I can't let someone else use my card.
Here's Len. I think
Yeah.
I'm encountering something very similar right now. Would an anecdote be helpful here? Do you think?
Uh, well, they are interesting. so let's.
So like, I think, Len, what you're asking, right now, I'm home for summer or for spring break, so I have a 7-day pass on my Charlie card. I think what Len is asking is, can I, if I had a similar thing on my AFC 2.0 Charlie card, could I give that to my dad if he needs to go downtown for a dentist appointment, so he can ride with the pass that I bought? Is like, can you swap cards like that? Is that the question you were asking,
Yeah.
Glenn?
Yeah. I figured as long as one person, I looked around a little bit myself. I couldn't find, anything that said that you can't let someone else use your pass. All I found was that if you have a discounted pass, you can't allow someone who doesn't get a discount to use that discounted pass, which makes sense. So you can't ride a reduced rate if you're expected to pay a full rate. I didn't see anything that said that if I have a pass, a full fare pass, and I'm not using it, I can give it to someone else to use. My thought is that
You're talking about a full fare pass.
A full fare pass, yeah. If I'm not using it, that I can't.
It sounds like we should wrap up this meeting on time and switch over to the public meeting that's going on right now.
I have another meeting to go to that's not going to be MBTA related.
No problem. In case anybody does want to, I'm going to drop the Zoom info for the meeting that's going on right now. March 22nd started at 6. I'm going to drop that Zoom link.
Are you should we move to public comment then? If you want it, if you're in it.
Yes.
Well, if there is public comment, I think Barry, you had something. We're basically back on time at this point.
Nothing important right now.
Okay. So, final discussion on this or any other topic?
Sorry.
Okay. I will say that when it comes to the Green Line extension, I personally am really interested in hearing about the interactions between the Union Square branch, the Medford kind of like a mainline branch. I know they're both considered branches, but those two branches and the new maintenance facility, because I remember spending way too much time, way too much of my own time looking at the track plans of the trains from this direction are going to sweep over here and go into the maintenance, and then they're going to come out this way. And I remember thinking that it was making my head spin, just the operational complexity of switching this way and coming back this way. And so I'm really interested, as we've started on Union Square. Well, first of all, has anybody heard, is the maintenance facility actually open yet?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think there was some discussion yesterday as we were going by it on the first train.
Okay.
But what I would suggest is that shortly after the second branch opens, that we arrange a multi-hour informed trip by project personnel, whether it's on a Saturday or an afternoon, and just get the whole trip from the whole inside information from some of the key project people. There was planned to be a triple overpass at near Brick Bottom Artists because of the maintenance facility and the two branches. And I haven't really looked into that in a couple of years. I just remember from the early planning. But
I thought the third in the triple overpass was the pedestrian pedestrian
well,
way.
that's there too. And the pedestrian and bike path is going to open 2 months after the second branch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the third in the triple. Commuter rail on the ground, green line above, pedestrian above that. Pretty sure.
Yeah, you might be right, but nevertheless, I think at some point, while there's a common information.
No, you know what? You might be right. Yeah, you're right. You might be right because. No, you're right because in order to get to the maintenance facility, if you're coming back from Union Square, yeah, you might be right. There may be a green over under.
Yeah, I just think when the project people are still there and the operational people have taken over, that's when the maximum information is going to be available.
Good point. Okay. It's coming up on, well, it is 3 minutes before. Any last comments, questions, plans for springtime? Advice on seeding your garden?
Yes, actually. One of the things that I noticed while writing the new Green Line extension is that the rebuilt Leechmere Viaduct still appears to have a speed restriction of 10 miles an hour.
Interesting.
I know that there was some qualifying language about the rebuild being substantially complete. So there may be more work to do, but it seems like track speed on that viaduct should be higher. And just sort of wondering if there is anything that happened there. If we can ask why that's slow.
Thanks, Bradley. Yeah, I know from prior discussions with maintenance of way folks and engineering that there is sort of like a burn-in time after new track goes into service. They don't allow. I think it's like federal regulation. I believe it has to have X number of vehicles pass or a period of time or both before it can be certified in case there's any shift under traffic. But I don't know what the spec or standard is. I remember hearing that from heavy rail lines, so I'm assuming that's the case for light rail as well.
I know that there were signs up with the 10-mile-an-hour restrictions, so maybe those are temporary, maybe those are permanent, but it's just a question I'd like to ask. I know that they did complete it pretty early, and I imagine that there was some pressure to not have a Green Line train derail on the viaduct on day one, because that would be really embarrassing, and of course make the news.
Very good.
Oh, unrelated, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
On weekends on the Red Line, they've been doing shuttles between JFK and Broadway. What kind of work are they doing?
I haven't heard. Anyone else?
I don't know either. I mean, I know that they, have been doing it, and so I don't know why though.
Craig, before we wrap up, any insight on that, like for that Red Line work that Barry just mentioned?
Sorry, I was distracted there. Where is that Red Line work? It's on.
Barry, can you say it again?
It's between JFK and Broadway that they're actually running the buses. They probably don't have to use. That's probably for operational reasons as opposed to maintenance. The maintenance actual area might be a lot more circumscribed. I was just wondering what it was that they were doing.
And so it's jumping over Andrew, is what you're saying?
It might be just Andrew, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not on the website any longer as a current or upcoming alert. The only ones that's upcoming is Wife to Harvard for 2 weekends in April. But that's weekends only, and that's north.
Yeah, so who know? Interesting if it was a. So it sounds like it shouldn't be going. I never saw it, but I haven't been riding all that frequently. So I maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe there was a medical emergency at Andrew or
Well, because
incident.
they did this a couple, 2 or
Well, it's
3 weeks
weekends.
in a row.
Yeah, it's been weekends.
Okay.
I mean, so
Yeah.
uh,
So it must have been something they were doing. But if it's not on the alerts, right, Stefan? It should be it should be over
Passed.
now going
Yeah.
forward.
Yep. Yeah, that's the tough thing about. I will say the MBTA does a pretty good job of putting up all known upcoming maintenance periods, having alerts out. But after the fact, it's really hard to find out what had happened.
Wayback Machine.
And
Use it way back.
The next
Yeah.
question, the question in my mind is, what are they actually doing?
Might have to use a Wayback Machine to do that. I mean, I know like on the red line when they did because after one of those weekends, they then did the shuttle from Harvard Square to Alewife, and then they explained that they are doing like the slab replacements or whatever it is. Which they've been doing for a while.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was.
Yeah, the red line transformation project page lists system-wide in progress redline signal upgrades, but
That's different.
that might have you doing some shuttling though. Well,
The one thing that's convenient about those bus interventions is the buses have to be like every 30 seconds to equal the red line.
yeah.
It's a lot of buses.
So was it crowded that on the first day of the Green Line extension? The first train, was it crowded?
No, it was I'd say, well, Jacob was there too. I'd say it was about a third full.
Oh,
I mean, it was pretty crowded. There were a lot of rail fans, not just local folks,
right.
which is great. I mean, I was surprised, honestly, when I got to the station at Union at 4 whatever, how many people were there, and also the enthusiasm. I mean, it was basically a rail fan crowd.
Alrighty, that's good. Glad you all had a great time.
Yeah, and the tea was, there were so many project people there, and it was an interesting day. And to be honest with you, for myself, I mean, I had actually no critical thought capacity at all. I was just so surprised to see it for real. It was like, oh my God, this is actually a real thing.
There you go.
Yeah,
And I think that's a perfect happy ending here. Wiggs just jumping for joy that he got to ride the Green Line. So
well, I was more like a kid, at a surprise. I mean, people wanted to ask me questions like after all the political speeches, and I really didn't have anything insightful to say. I was just so surprised by the whole thing. But I have to say, that was the best way to experience it, as opposed to a critical experience.
well, let me be the first. Well, maybe not the first. Wig, thank you for all the work that you did to make the Green Line extension happen. I mean that.
Well, it was not intentional from the beginning. It was just a habit that I got into for 25 years. First on.
That's not a habit. That's a life.
Well, whatever it is, it wasn't planned. It just it was one foot in front of, it's like, it was like Tom Hanks walking across the country a few times. And
I like that. Very good.
Okay, folks.
Anyone
Well,
care to make a motion to
Yep,
adjourn?
I'll make a motion to close. It's 7:05. We're overdue.
I'll second that. Thank you, everyone.
bye-bye. Take care.
Enjoy springtime.
See you in April.
Good night.